The 14th year of Chenghua. Chapter 55. Scene Bear. The promotions of military posts weren't too similar to those of civil officials, and divisions like the Chenghua relied upon imperial favor and merits to a great extent. Even so, someone like Suizhou, who rose from court general position to Chenghua all the way to commander position of the Northern Administrative Court Division over the very brief span of a year, was still very eye-grabbing. When the heads of the office had been taken down by Yuan Bin, the few Chenghua under the former head had all been staring covetously at that position, only for Suizhou to come up from behind and occupy it. This inevitably put everyone into a bit of disbelief. After he had taken up the post, they had overtly and covertly tried to make things difficult for him, like secretly sabotaging him, procrastinating and other such things on assignments that should have long been finished prior. Some people looked at Suizhou's perpetually frosty face and felt that he was bound to be someone very exacting upon his subordinates, went and tried to get close to Xueling and his group in the hope that they could dig out some information that they could use to blackmail Suizhou or use as premise to file a complaint to their superiors in order to pull him down from his position. See. How are the Chenghua any different from the civil officials when they both resort to such dirty tactics? Amongst the civil officials, there was no lack of backstabbing and underhanded tactics being employed, what more of those in an intelligence division whose actual work involved those sort of things. There were those who set up traps, laughing behind the backs of the people they dragged down to the mud. Wherever there were humans, there were turbulent rivers. That was a statement that could be applied everywhere. Within a few days, someone had already presented a complaint to Yuan Bin, stating that Suizhou hadn't been in his position for long before he started forcing the Chenghua to train, adding in many programs that hadn't existed before at a tempo that would torture the entire Chenghua to death. If he wasn't stopped, they all likely wouldn't be able to withstand it. Yuan Bin was 78 that year. What scheme had he not seen before? As the commanding officer, he looked down from up on high and could view the minds of all sorts of people, yet he had said nothing, did nothing, didn't lend a hand to Suizhou's predicament, and didn't call Suizhou over to chastise him because of such complaints. He had merely quietly watched what was happening. If Suizhou couldn't resolve these troubles on his own, he wouldn't be worthy of sitting in that position. Sure enough, everybody stopped coming around very quickly. Martial arts had always been a must for the Chenghua, so they did regular practice and exercise, but since the time of the founding of the dynasty, the practice had started to wane as many were inevitably becoming lazier and lazier. Even the imperial army had turned into a pretty useless display on the battlefield. Despite the Chenghua functions of being imperial bodyguards, patrolling the capital city and apprehending criminals, they were no longer as fearsome or as formidable as they were when it was first established. Coupled with the repression of the Eastern Depot and the swift raise to power of the Western Depot, more and more authority were being taken out of the Chenghua and its power declined more and more. That was why no matter what headway they made with regards to the investigation of White Lotus Society before, the Chenghua never profited very much. After Suizhou took a leadership role in the Northern Administrative Court Division, the first thing he had wanted to change was its general atmosphere. Thus, he had given the firm order that starting from the beginning of each month, once every 3 days in the early time of the Tiger, 3 to 5 a.m., and excluding those that were on duty or on out-of-town assignments, everyone had to assemble at the training grounds to practice for 2 Shishan. All training regiments followed the battalions, with some extra components added in by Suizhou. For many of those that had long grown accustomed to doing nothing and sleeping until the sun was high in the sky, then wandering about brothels and gambling halls in the night, this was unbearable. They all excessively whined for days on end, and even ran off to Yuan Bin to file complaints such as the commander Suikin, whose position wasn't high and was incompatible with the vast authority he was being given, that he was mistreating his subordinates, that he lacked humanity, that he was flaunting his authority, and so on and so forth. It had seemed, at first, that Yuan Bin would not be able to sit idly by and ignore such numerous complaints, but unbeknownst to them, Suizhou had already informed him of all of this in advance. Prior to implementing the training program, he had sought Yuan Ben out and presented his plans to him. He explained the goals and reasoning behind them. As it were, Yuan Ben disapproved of how the Jinyue had become so corrupted due to Wantong, hence why he was unmoved by so many coming to complain. In all things, one must first win over the understanding and comprehension of their superiors. Once they knew clearly that what one were doing was correct, the opinions of those below him wouldn't matter that much. Any action that altered existing conditions would always be met with resistance, but if nothing was done out of fear of said resistance, Suizhou would just be waiting to be made into an empty figurehead. Seeing that their complaints were useless, everyone had no choice but to comply with Suizhou's orders, and reluctantly come to the training grounds for practice. At the beginning, a quarter hour had passed in the time of the tiger, a number of people had never shown up. Every one of those absentees were pulled away for corporal punishment and suffered from getting 10 hard hits with a paddle each. After which they still had to continue with training. If they were still late the next time, they would get another 10 strikes added, and so on and so forth for any further subsequent times. They all learned that Suizhou was serious about this and no one dared to be late the second time. The contents of the training outline he had set up, however, included balancing a bowl of water on top of one's head while maintaining a crouched horse stance position under the sun for half a shishin, all while holding 10 kati weights in each hand. If any water was spilled, that would be considered a violation of the guidelines, and their time would proceed to be prolonged by another half a shishin. A lot of people had raised objections to this, thinking it too painful and exhausting. The Jinyue who had been spoiled for a long time had profusely expressed that they couldn't do this, that it was simply impossible to complete such training regimen within 2 shishins, and other such excuses. Without pomp, Suizhou had personally gone onto the field and demonstrated for them. Everyone had watched him for half a shishin with their own eyes. Not only had the bowl on his head never fallen off, but not even a drop of water in the bowl had splashed out, which thereafter made them entirely convinced, in both heart and word. Xueling's group had never needed to speak up. They had always followed in Suizhou's footsteps, doing whatever it was he ever said to with absolutely no dissent. The rest had discovered that this newly appointed commander was decisive and kept to his word, where complaining and being lazy would have no effect, so they had to steel their hearts and train with him as he instructed. Still, Suizhou was not just blindly making uncompromising demands. At the end of every month, he would treat everybody to a meal, and those that had displayed excellence would get extra rewards. The money for that all came out of the communal treasury. Of course, though, when Wantong had been around and his people had managed both the northern and southern administrative court divisions, said funds had often been used privately and spent recklessly, while those below hadn't even needed to think about touching them. With no material benefit, they all had been obliged to reach down even further to lower levels. Following Suizhou's appointment, he had the account books monitored, with each expense required to be clearly noted. Like so, an extra sum of silver could be withdrawn for the purpose of appropriate reward, which was to everyone's satisfaction. Within 3 months of this, when everybody had gradually gotten used to this stringent training, the grumbling lessened, to say nothing of the fact that the atmosphere in the Jinyue had completely changed, at the very least in relevance to how it had been before. It was a good change naturally, and if nothing else, the efficiency of how the Jinyue were handling cases had greatly improved as of late. A superior that set examples, as well as clearly distinguished their punishments and rewards, was much better than a superior that only knew how to eat, drink, whore, gamble, and monopolize all the benefits for themselves all day long. Suizhou was much stricter than the previous commander, but his strictness had advantages. Those that had good relations with the previous head could no longer sneak around, and the subordinates that hadn't been able to hug that boss's thighs no longer needed to worry about life being made difficult for them. Before anyone had realized it, Suizhou's position became increasingly stable, and he slowly began to leave his own mark on these people. On this day, Tang Fan had just came out from the Ministry of Appointments building. His mind was invigorated on account of a happy occasion. There was even a skip in his gait. Upon seeing that it was still early, he changed directions. Instead of heading for home, he headed for the Northern Administrative Court Division. He hadn't been over here since Suizhou's promotion. Entry to the office had become a lot stricter than it was before. The front guard on duty didn't recognize him. As it was a little odd to see a 6th-rank civil official coming there, he stopped him. Upon hearing that he was going to see Suizhou, his expression grew even stranger. "Who are you?" the on-duty Chenghua interrogated. "What's your purpose in seeking out the commander?" The guard's attitude wasn't that great. If it wasn't for Tang Fan wearing his official's uniform, the guard might have suspected that the other was dropping by in his free time to come have a laugh at him. It was little wonder that he thought like that. The majority of civil officials cherished their plumage and their reputations, so in general, they would only ever reluctantly drop by the imperial prison after getting invited over. Ones that came of their own volition, like Tang Fan, were rare. "This one is called Tang Fan," said Man answered. "I'm a friend of your commander. Excuse me for troubling you with passing on a message, but since he has not gotten off work yet, please ask him to come out here." Suizhou shouldn't really be getting called commander, strictly speaking, because he was only in that position temporarily, but people in position like to flaunt their title. For example, Deputy Chenghua would be directly called Chenghua, making it sound better than it was. The guard looked at him doubtfully, disbelieving from the bottom of his heart that a man like their commander would have any friends. Moreover, this man's rank was pretty low, making him wonder whether he was bluffing about his connection in order to climb to a higher position using the commander. Noticing his suspicion, Tang Fan smiled. "Please pass word on, my good brother. If he won't see me, I'll go back home." The guard wasn't purposefully trying to make things difficult for him, really, but regulations had gotten a lot stricter as of late. Were he to hastily go in and be a bother only for this man to not have that much weight, he might be getting the paddle. "He's occupied with something important," the man thus said, straight-faced. "Come again another day." Tang Fan gave an O and said, "I'll ask this, then, is he still inside or has he gone home?" "He's still inside." Tang Fan nodded. "I'll wait for him here, then." With that, he shifted his robes aside, sat down upon the steps, drew out a book from his pocket and began to read. The guard glared at him. "How dare you be so impudent at the entrance of the imperial prison? What a joke! How could the prestigious, awe-inspiring imperial prison frighten anyone with somebody reading right in front of its gates?" Tang Fan gave him a leisurely glance. "I asked you to go notify him and you refused. I'm going to read while I wait right here, which isn't getting in your way. I am also not blocking the gate. I am sitting to the side, isn't it?" The guard was speechless. When he thought to say something, his companion that was also keeping watch at the door gave him a look, then got in close to whisper to him. "Are you stupid? Why don't you go in and notify the commander? If he's a friend of the commander, you can't be offending him. If he isn't, we'll just drive him away." The other rolled his eyes at him and said, "You're one to talk. Why aren't you going in yourself, then?" His companion chuckled. "I will. Don't be jealous when I get the commander's praises later." The man didn't believe him, but his friend actually did turn and go in to make a report. Not long after, he saw his companion rush out from inside, face full of smiles for Tang Fan. "Good sir, the commander is busy right now, but he's asked you to come in and wait for him." His mouth opened wide as he watched his companion attentively guide Tang Fan in. A good while later, when the other came back, he hurriedly asked, "Who is that guy?" "A friend of the commander." "You didn't recognize him?" "He just said that his name is Tang Fan." "I've heard he's staying in the commander's house." The guard sucked in a cold breath. "It's that good of a friendship. How could it not be? How come you didn't say so earlier?" The man stamped his foot, dejected. "Blame yourself for being blind," his companion mocked. I even warned you, and you still didn't go make a report. If the commander came to pin blame afterwards, there'd be no way that I was getting scolded along with you. Depressed into silence, the man thought of how he had missed another opportunity to show his face to their commander. Regardless of whatever those two guards were thinking of, Tang Fan arrived at the training grounds under the guidance of the watchman. Before he even saw any figure, he heard the distant shouts of a fight coming from far away, and only upon coming near did he discover that there was a martial competition going on at the training grounds. In the center of the field, two figures rose up and dropped down swiftly, the light from their sabers intersecting. This bout was not a flashy show to dazzle one's eyes and ears but a completely relentless, true battle with intent to kill. Upon taking an even closer look, wasn't one amongst them Suizhou? He was competing with another on field. Next to them was an encompassing circle of people, each one jeering and cheering. Tang Fan looked around, spotted Xueling's figure in the crowd and then walked over, slapping him on the shoulder while he was unaware. Xueling jumped in fright. Right as he was about to get mad, his anger turned to happiness as soon as he turned to see. How come you're here? One that's idle will wander all over. Tang Fan chuckled. Are you all having a competition? Why did even your commander have to get on the scene? Xueling grinned. Big Brother previously established a rule that contests were going to be held at the end of each month. Contestants can issue challenges towards anyone, while the final winner gets a hefty reward. Lots of guys have been badly admonished by him before and were holding in their anger, so they wrote him challenges for a duel, only for him to beat them all down onto their stomachs, one by one. Heh heh heh, they still have no idea how awesome he is, but how could I not? I, Lao Shui, am not about to bring embarrassment to myself. While he was talking, the match's loser and victor had already been decided. The one competing with Suizhou had believed himself to have spotted a gap in the other's defenses, raising his spring-gilt saber to sweep it from behind in an attempted sneak attack. However, the other apparently had eyes grown on his back, the tip of his toes touched upon the ground, and he soared up, did a flip in mid-air, then sent his opponent flying with a kick. When his own body was incrementally falling to the ground, he took that landing power to go from lying flat on his back to once again stood steadily. That entire series of events had been akin to traveling clouds and flowing water, extremely nimble, and having a sense of beauty that brimmed with strength. The onlookers applauded heartily, cheering in rises and falls. Suizhou was only in a pair of pants as he stood in the middle of the arena, his upper body bare. Sweat trailed down from every area on his forehead and neck to slide down the rest of him, his entire body drenched in it, his bulging muscles glistening under the sunlight. It was clear that such a physical build had been obtained from incessant and diligent daily tempering, which hadn't gotten sloppy due to attaining a high position at all. He stared at his opponent that he had kicked over onto the ground, backhandedly sticking the spring-gilt saber into the ground. If you haven't given up yet, come at me again, he said icily. His consciousness was currently fully immersed within the fight. To him, there was no division between swapping pointers and dueling. Since he was on the field, he needed to spare no effort, and treat this seriously. This was both respect towards himself and respect towards his opponent. The one he was staring at felt like he was being pinned by a ferocious beast. Unable to resist a shiver, he couldn't drum up any will to fight anymore and hurriedly took back his saber, cupping his hands. I give. Your skills are outstanding, sir. This subordinate admits defeat. Those surrounding hooted with laughter. This man had overcome everyone in the office for 2 months in a row, likely feeling a bit proud of himself. He had thus challenged Suizhou. Many had been defeated by Commander Sui Qinhu before, but he had been certain that he would be the one exception, not expecting that he would be conceding in the end. It was truly tragic. The instant his counterpart gave in, the harsh aura surrounding Suizhou suddenly softened up. He walked over and pulled that subordinate up, then clapped him on the shoulder. You're already pretty good. Master Yuan intends on having us compare knowledge with the other battalions in order to boost morale. At that time, the fight for our office's honor will wholly depend on you. Said underling had been a bit embarrassed, but after hearing that, he promptly got a surge of emotion. Don't worry, sir. I'll definitely do all that I can to never let our office lose face. This method of hit, then support was quite forcefully convincing. Tang Fan had his hands behind his back, watching the scene with a full smile. He wasn't anxious to step forward. After Suizhou had finished motivating his subordinates, the conclusion had been announced, and everyone had scattered. He leisurely walked up to him. You're very mighty, Commander. Looks like your proper place is just around the bend. It wasn't that Suizhou hadn't noticed Tang Fan beforehand, but that it simply hadn't been convenient to speak. Everyone else was now gone, and it was him alone that was watching him with a smile, thinking of how he didn't have a single con of thread on his upper body. A trace of hard-to-perceive bashfulness flashed past Suizhou's cold face. Why did you come looking for me? If it's nothing urgent, wait a bit for me to wash and change clothes. Tang Fan grinned. Go and change, I'm not in a hurry. I'm inviting you to dinner today at Xianqi restaurant. Want to go? Suizhou had been walking back to the room where the changes of clothes were, but upon hearing this, he stopped and raised his eyebrows. Where did that money come from? Master Tang did not have spare amount right now. Each month, he could spend half of his salary, but the other half went to Suizhou for safekeeping, in order to prevent him from wastefully squandering his coins. If he had used up the half that he had, there was basically no way that he could spend the money Suizhou was guarding. Tang Fan laughed and said, "It fell down from the sky." Seeing that he was keeping him in suspense, Suizhou was no longer worried. Once he was done freshening up and changing, he found Tang Fan sipping tea in his personal work office. Upon noticing that he had arrived, Tang Fan got up. Kman, Kman, Kman. Let's go eat. Suizhou just shook his head, questioning him afterwards. Did you get promoted? Tang Fan had anticipated that he would guess as much, so he wasn't startled upon hearing this, nodding animatedly. Yep. What post? Chief of the Henan office in the Ministry of Justice. My late mother was granted the 5th rank title of Lady of Peace, and I was granted an additional 100 taels of silver. Those 3 above-mentioned articles had to be the belated rewards for his exceptional performances in the East Palace and child abduction cases. Suizhou's brows lifted, and then he immediately loosened up, the corners of his mouth faintly lifting. That's great. It really is worthy of celebration. Tang Fan grinned. I don't insist upon getting a higher post and more salary, but doing something and getting proper compensation for it is a happy event. You're not going to stop me from treating you to food this time, right? Suizhou nodded, but then said, no need to go out to eat. Have Adong purchase some more ingredients tomorrow and I'll cook at home. Once he heard that, both of Tang Fan's eyes shone with sparkles at once. Suizhou could definitely swear that he saw light showing through them, and had no idea how to react. Do you like the food I cook more than that of Xianqi restaurant? Tang Fan laughed, his graceful and elegant air suddenly wiped out of existence. That's only natural. How could the dishes made by the Sui Guangchuan himself be inferior to those at Xianqi restaurant? His very lavish compliment automatically made the curve of Suizhou's smile even bigger. The head of their family was in a good mood, which surely blessed the other two. That evening, Suizhou had a rare bout of cooking fever, personally making pork strips flavored with yuxiang, sweet and sour spare ribs, and red-cooked lion's head meatballs. Adong had even wrapped up some jimao dumplings that Tang Fan had constantly been thinking about. Added onto all this was a jug of green plum wine simmered atop a red clay stove. Because Adong was still young, she had to obtain permission to drink such sour-sweet wine. Prior to starting the meal, Adong filled up 2 wine cups for Tang Fan and Suizhou, then offered them up on her own initiative. Congratulations on your promotion, Gig. Congratulations on your promotion, brother Sui. The two smiled and drank their cups down in one gulp. Actually, the 3-year authenticator position is not up yet, Tang Fan said. Logically speaking, I haven't yet reached the time for promotion, but Chief Zhou of the Henan office recently died of sudden illness, coincidentally vacating a spot over there. They then had me fill in for the vacancy, before anything else happened. Sui Zhou nodded. In bureaucracy, there's typically too many monks and not enough kanji. Your bureau isn't seen as a cushy job, but freeing up a spot for it is difficult, and there's bound to be many scrambling over it. You might have wrestled away somebody's livelihood. People being envious of you is unavoidable, so be a bit careful when you first get there. In truth, there wasn't really a need for him to warn him. Tang Fan appeared to be a free spirit, but he actually had no shortage of slyness and prudence. Still, the kind regard of a good friend was something he was going to appreciate, so he gave a serious promise. What rank are you now, then, Gig? Dong wondered. I used to be 6th rank and now I'm a true 5th rank. That's a rank and a half of promotion. In a few more years' time, you'll probably be able to get 1st rank, right? She asked excitedly. Tang Fan was not amused. You're acting like the emperor is my dad and my family runs the great Ming Dynasty. She covered up her grin. Wouldn't he be delighted that you want him to be your dad, though? If this old man had a father like him, that would be way too miserable, he thought to himself, simultaneously raising his hand to strike a pose of being about to bop her. Ever since she had returned from being abducted, she had worked all the harder to learn martial arts from Sui Zhou, and it had come to a point where Tang Fan couldn't catch her anymore and could only glare at her. There was a reason it was said that everybody in this world each had something they were good at. For example, Dong had no talent with it comes to studying, but she had a gift for learning martial arts that surpassed others. Meanwhile, Tang Fan could study and be an official, but he could make no progress in learning martial arts no matter how hard he tried. Having also experienced the Southside Gang incident, he too had wanted to learn a few moves for self-defense purposes. However, after holding a horse stance for half a shishin with Dong, she had remained standing steady with gritted teeth in spite of the sweat soaking her back, while he had long since wavered, spitting up foam as he proclaimed that he gave up. He decided that, instead of learning how to fight, he should just do less dangerous stuff from now on. Following the Ministry of Appointments' written approval, he would be able to report to his new division. Before that, though, he was going to pay a visit to his former superior and disciple brother, Pan Bin, and thank him for these 2 years of support. Once Pan Bin had heard the news that Tang Fan was on the eve of being promoted to the Ministry of Justice, he was both pleased and disappointed. What was pleasing was that Tang Fan and he were brothers with the same mentor, and with that layer of connection, they could look out for each other in their circle forevermore. His young junior having a bright future brought no disadvantage to him. What was disappointing was that Tang Fan was 25 this year, yet already a true 5th rank official. Even though he had entered Shuntian Prefecture midway through his road from Hanlin Imperial Academy, he had now made his way back into the 6 ministries, walking the path of conventional promotion to a successive appointment as a cabinet minister, still young and promising. In contrast to this, Pan Bin himself had been interred as a palace honorate, but because his rank hadn't been near the top, he hadn't been chosen as a Hanlin Imperial Academy entrant, giving him a tier less of accomplishments than Tang Fan. This year, he was over 40 and the Shuntian prefect to an outsider that didn't understand the truth. That seemed pretty good, but he knew well that if he ever wanted to move up further, it would be quite difficult, as he had no backers, nor had he mastered skills and aptitude. Looking at Tang Fan, it was hard for Pan Bin to prevent a surge of grief and self-pity, in a sense that the Yangtze's waves in the back pushed the waves in the front forwards, causing them to die upon the beach. No matter what though, he couldn't put on a long face for Tang Fan, as this man did not owe him any money. He still managed to muster up his energy to bring out his status as the senior, first congratulating Tang Fan, then earnestly urging him to be on guard against arrogance and not get complacent as a result of this. One's biggest enemy in the bureaucracy was typically not other people but themselves. This was all talk from experience. Tang Fan received his instruction on humility, which ended with him staying over at Pan Bin's place for a home-cooked meal. The two of them was still in the capital, able to see each other with a lift of their heads. There was no need to treat this like an eternal parting. In any case, by the time Tang Fan had handed over his duties in the Shuntian prefecture and reported into the Ministry of Justice, it was already May's early summer season. This year was the 15th of Chenghua. And, not even 2 days after entering the ministry, Tang Fan discovered that he was inexplicably getting isolated. End chapter. The 14th year of Chenghua. Chapter 56. Angering someone to death again. According to the positions of each one, the order of the great Ming's 6 ministries were as follows: Ministry of Appointments, Ministry of Revenue, Ministry of Rights, Ministry of War, Ministry of Justice and Ministry of Civil Works. The Ministry of Appointments were responsible for the promotions and appraisals of all officials. That it was the utmost of importance did not need to be said. Ministry of Revenue was in charge of the government finances. The positions of Ministry of Rights and Ministry of War were actually not that low, owing to an old adage that had been conveyed for a long time: the major events of the nation lie in offerings and weapons. Offerings were all sorts of religious rites, sacrificial offers, divinations, and other such things. Ministry of Rights became responsible for them after the 6 ministries were formed. Weapons was military matters. Therefore, when it came to status, Ministry of Rights was the most pure and noble, while Ministry of War was indispensable for any nation. When all was said and done, each of them had a high status, each of them were important and irreplaceable, so Ministry of Justice and Ministry of Civil Works were at the bottom seats. However, being at the lower position didn't mean that their lack of greasy bribe money. If they were to arrange based on greasy bribe money received, the arrangement ought to be as follows: Ministry of Appointments, Ministry of Revenue, Ministry of Civil Works, Ministry of War, Ministry of Rights and Ministry of Justice. Such arrangement was understandable since the Ministry of Appointments was in charge of officials' promotions. Everyone would inevitably send money and gifts for the sake of getting a good position or to prevent getting negative review in evaluations. Therein, the Office of Civil Selection, in other words, the branch controlling the appraisals of civil officials, received the most bribe. Although the Ministry of Civil Works position wasn't high, it was only because of the traditional concept of everyone and not that it lacked corruption in any ways. If palaces needed to be built or river dikes needed to be constructed, money is required. Whenever money is required, all sort of loopholes could be found or created in order to cut off pieces of greasy profits. There was no way around this. Being a court official in the Ming Dynasty meant getting very little salary. Not everybody was willing to toil as hard as Tang Fan in writing novels to supplement their income. In spite of the Ministry of Revenue being responsible for management of government fund, theirs wasn't much greasy money to get there. Taxes were getting lower and lower, yet they still weren't always getting collected, as more and more rich people were evading them. The taxes on commerce, meanwhile, had not changed since the founding of the dynasty, and it was so excessively low that it was almost negligible. Some areas basically never even collected it. For this reason, the great Ming's Ministry of Revenue had become the most impoverished one in history. The emperor empathized with public welfare, but even though the tax rate had been made lower, the common people were still miserable as they were vulnerable to exploitation. With all the villains allowed to act amongst central authorities, that money ended up not landing in the hands of the central government. According to Tang Fan's own personal calculations, the national treasury's annual tax revenue from the previous year had been around 4 million taels, which was quite a lot, and there was only about 2 million left from the various natural disasters the year before last. However, that money needed to be allocated to the various departments and could not be kept by the Ministry of Revenue alone. The Ministry of War would cry out for wars, the Ministry of Rites would cry out for money for divine rituals and imperial exams, the Ministry of Civil Works would cry out about a dam having collapsed once again somewhere and that they hadn't the money to fix it. After dividing the amount up, the Ministry of Revenue would only have so much coin left over for itself. It was no wonder that officials' salaries were never raised, because even if the emperor did have the mind to raise wages, he wouldn't actually have the money to do so. For the sake of their survival and happiness, honest officials were getting fewer and fewer while the corrupt ones were growing in number. If their superior didn't care, those under them would follow suit and thus, putting the Chenghua court into complete shambles. Yet, these things were not for Tang Fan to be concerned about but should be the worries of those ministers and cabinet members. Even if he wanted to take care of it, no one would listen to him. To make things brief and concise, regardless of whether one was looking at comfortable position or greasy money, the Ministry of Justice ranked at the bottom of both. Even though it dealt with prosecutions all over the nation, any case that reached a level that would require the handling of the Ministry of Justice generally meant that the case was important and difficult to judge, meaning that no one would dare to bribe any more for them. Even if they did, it would have no use, since the ministry didn't even have the final say on such cases at times. It would require a three-party hearing with the Court of Judicial Review and Inspectorate, suffering the impediments of two additional branches. As a brother in the same boat, the Ministry of Rites was also a cold government office that received very little bribe, though it was also in charge of the imperial exams, which were grand occasions for the realm's scholars. Its minister generally managed the Imperial Hanlin Academy, too, making its status dignified and aloof. The bottom ministries were really not comparable. And now, Tang Fan was going to that ministry. Was the Ministry of Justice important? Of course it was. Without it, many major cases will not be handled and judged. Moreover, after the death row inmates from various locations were submitted to the central government, they had to wait for the ministry's approval. Regardless of how important it was, though, there was no way to change the fact that it had no grease to dredge up. Just like the other 5 ministries, the Ministry of Justice had 1 minister, and 2 assistant ministers. Lower tiers were divided into offices on the basis of regional subdivisions, which specialized in hearing cases each province sent upwards. In addition to those was the penal office, also colloquially known as the divine jail, as well as the subordinates of various leaders like the office clerks, secretaries, bailiffs, and other such people of no rank. Tang Fan was the true 5th-rank chief of the Henan office, in other words, its leader. He was directly subordinate to the minister above him and had to manage all of those below him at the Henan office. On the day he took office, he first went to pay respects to the minister and the 2 assistant ministers, as was expected of him. The present Minister of Justice was Zhang Ying, who was close with the chief of the cabinet Wanan and was under the faction of Consort Wan. That he was duplicitous had no need to be discussed, so he naturally wasn't a good person, either. In any case, everybody had to scrape by to pass their days, and this man just happened to be one of those 6 ministers that were like clay figurines, so named by the society. However, Minister Zhang was not around today. Having thrown himself at empty air, Tang Fan could only visit the 2 assistant ministers before him. Liang Wenhua, the assistant minister of the left, had a slightly weird attitude towards him. During his self-introduction and courtesy greetings, he only narrowed his eyes at him and said, "I heard that you were previously posted at the Shuntian prefecture." Tang Fan confirmed this. Even though the Shuntian prefecture is in charge of keeping peace in the capital, it's just a local bureau, when all is said and done. It can't be compared to the Ministry of Justice. When you come here, you'll have to adapt properly and not bring that prefecture narrow-mindedness with you. The 6 ministries are the 6 ministries, Shuntian prefecture is no comparison at all. Tang Fan was a bit confused, unable to comprehend where this man's hostile attitude had come from. As far as he knew, they had never met each other before, let alone had any enmity between them. For Liang Wenhua to flaunt his seniority like this the moment he met him as if he owed him a lot money. Despite of his real thought, he maintained an ever respectful visage on the outside. "I will solemnly observe your instruction." Assistant Minister Liang continued to give him a lengthy lecture, but Tang Fan remained standing there like a human stake, continuing to be deferential no matter what he said. Feeling this to be boring, he waved his hand to dismiss him. Tang Fan then headed to Assistant Minister of the Right Peng Yushun's office. The man had just had his 65th birthday last month and he wasn't in good health, already half retired. Under such circumstances, his chances of getting promoted again were not that great, and he therefore had no conflict with the rest of the ministry people. Upon meeting Tang Fan, he rambled on and on at him and gave him a spiel of encouragement. He didn't say anything important, all of it were senseless drivel, but it was an indication of his good-natured personality, where he didn't let down his reputation of being a yes man. Seeing that he was good to talk to, Tang Fan accordingly asked for pointers. Assistant Minister Peng, this humble official has never gotten acquainted with Assistant Minister Liang before this, let alone held enmity with him, yet when I went to pay him a visit just prior, there was quite some coldness amidst his words, which caused me confusion. Has he come across some sort of unhappiness, or have I inadvertently offended him? The man laughed. He's probably just been in a bad mood lately. Don't you worry, it'll be fine in a few days. Straightforward words were an impossibility in any dialogue within the bureaucracy. The listener would need to figure things out on their own. With how clever Tang Fan was, he immediately deduced a clue out of his words. It appears that his bad mood has something to do with me. Peng Yushun thought for a time, then ended up saying to him, he has a disciple that's currently in the position of Deputy Chief of Justice. When that position in Henan emptied, he had set his heart on his disciple. Tang Fan understood. As it turned out, he had become a halfway incumbent Chenghua, stealing a peak seat someone else had been wanting and naturally making them not look at him nicely. Now that he knew the truth, he felt powerless. There were only so many official posts, but many that wanted to be promoted to them. However, there could only be one radish per hole. Once you took one up, others could only envy you and would inevitably see you as an eyesore, unless you agreed to give up your position. The question was, who would be willing to do that? Seeing the helpless look he had, Assistant Peng smiled. Since you're here, be at ease. Work well and it'll be fine. As Tang Fan had respect towards this affable old master, he promptly answered that he would benefit from his pointers. After meeting with the two assistant ministers, he returned to the courtyard where each of the offices were located. They were partitioned in accordance with the Great Ming's 13 provinces, making 13 offices in total. Since he was a later entry, he had to visit all of his colleagues and seniors on his own initiative. The majority of them displayed indifference towards this young co-worker, even being somewhat disaffectedly polite, which he found dull. Since he had learned the general situation right out of Peng Yushun's mouth, though, he could understand their attitudes. Owing to word on the wind in the court, it was said that Zhang Ying was going to enter the cabinet to fill a vacancy, so his position as Minister of Justice would surely be given up. Among the two assistant ministers, Peng Yushun was old and ailing, so as a matter of course, Liang Wenhua, the one that found Tang Fan displeasing to the eye, had his candidacy for becoming the next Minister of Justice in the bag. Was there anyone who didn't act according to the weather when in the middle of the bureaucracy? Tang Fan had taken the position that was expected to be taken by the next minister's disciple, which made Liang Wenhua quite upset. On top of that, Tang Fan had not a bit of foundation inside the Ministry of Justice. Between keeping distance from a true 5th-rank chief and offending a true 3rd-rank assistant minister, how would anybody choose? There wasn't even a need to think about it. Were anyone to get close to Tang Fan right now, wouldn't that mean that they placed no importance upon Assistant Minister Liang? It was for this reason that when Tang Fan paid visits to the rest of the 12 offices, he received basically the same attitude all the while. No one would be too blatant, of course, but they also weren't unduly cordial either, being politely aloof and giving impersonal greetings. It made one unspeakably ill at ease from head to toe, yet also unable to pick out faults with them. The one exception to this was Lu Tongguang, chief of the Jiangzi office. The old fellow was as generous a person as Pen Yushun. Seeing that Tang Fan appeared to be unknowing of the cause of all this, he discreetly informed him via roundabout hints that Liang Wenhua was not an open-minded man. He also suggested that it would be best if he found a time to apologize to Assistant Minister Liang, lest he harbor a grudge and make things difficult for him on a regular basis. Tang Fan thanked him for his kindly regards, but pretended not to comprehend his suggestion because, in his own view, he had done nothing wrong. This post was not one he himself had asked for but had been allocated to him by the Ministry of Appointments. Assistant Minister Liang was too afraid to seek out the Ministry of Appointment people to settle this debt with, so he was casting his anger upon his head, which was really unreasonable. Having to frequently make compromises was a reality of being an official, but one could not draw back until there was no room anymore. That would only be letting others bully you to death. Furthermore, since Liang Wenhua was narrow-minded, then even if he did pour him tea, apologized and take all of the blame upon himself, the other would certainly keep on bearing this enmity. As Tang Fan refused to heed him, Lu Tongguang mentally sighed, thinking to himself that young people were much too prideful and impetuous. One of these days, after suffering a huge setback, he would come to accept the facts. Thus, he persuaded him no further and instead informed him of some minor matters from each office as thinking it would produce good karma. He had always been a warm-hearted person, also taking it upon himself to give guidance to Tang Fan. This is your first time at the offices, so you aren't familiar with the staff, especially not those unranked clerks and bailiffs. Their statuses are the lowest, but they're also the ones most likely to be slippery. If you want to prompt them into action, you may as well invite them out for meals, first. Keep in touch with them and maintain good relationship with them, and then you'll have opportunities to understand situations, instead of be kept in the dark about everything that might happen. Tang Fan thanked him for the lesson, then tentatively asked, "Before I entered the ministry, I heard that the offices have monthly group dinners together, which individuals take turns hosting. Is that true? I don't fear your ridicule, Brother Lu. My parents passed early, but my daily expenses alone are not few. If there is such a practice, I may as well take out a loan ahead of time so as to avoid not having the money to treat guests." Lu Tongguang nodded. "We do indeed, but there's no need for you to worry. The places we go to aren't expensive restaurants like the Xianqi restaurant, but ordinary canteens. We don't use anyone's salary for them, either." Tang Fan was surprised to hear that. "Where does the money come from, then?" The two were deep in conversation, despite being practically strangers. Lu Tongguang hesitated to speak, but finally told him the truth. The Ministry of Justice was not like how it had been as Tang Fan's imagined. Despite being a cold government office, it was not without greasy bribe money. Some important cases, given that they had nothing to do with conspiracies, would generally be given to the ministry to handle once it was reported to them, and therein laid room for possible discussion. When it came to sentences of exile, for example, 300 li and 3,000 li were definitely not the same. In sentences of rod strikes, 10 strikes versus 100 strikes, the difference was even more striking. With it comes to the lightness and the heaviness of punishments, the Ministry of Justice had the final say. For many crimes, the Great Ming Code only held broad provisions, so if someone pushing for lenience came along, a lighter sentence wouldn't matter much. Yet, this also depended upon the region. Zhejiang, Huiguang, and Jiangxi were classified as relatively affluent provinces, so they had a lot of wealthy people and facilitation money was easy to come by. For Guizhou, Yunnan, and Henan, where Tang Fan was, there was a lot less bribes. These were all unwritten rules. Therefore, even though each office took turns with the hosting, the reality was that the ones that were a little richer would separate out some bribes for the others to treat guests, thus preventing the other offices from being red-eyed with jealousy and running off to tell on them. A period of desperate struggle would be no fun for anyone. Noticing that Tang Fan had just had an epiphany, Lu Tongguang continued. There's no need to be concerned, really. Everyone knows that the Henan chief doesn't get much and won't force you to treat them. As you're a newcomer, though, if you want to have good relations with everyone else, you'd best not be stingy with your bit of money. Should you be worried about not having enough, I have a bit here. Acknowledging his generosity, Tang Fan quickly smiled at him. There's no need for that, I was only asking. Many thanks for your thought, Brother Lu, but I can still afford to pay for one meal. You sharing all this has put me at ease. I was thinking that I would have to be entertaining every single month. With this back and forth, their relationship had swiftly become closer. Lu Tongguang burst out laughing. How could that be a thing? Not even the higher UPS would be able to afford that. Then, dare I ask, who will be the host for this month? The other twirled his beard and said, according to the setup, it ought to be my turn. What a coincidence. Since that's so, can we discuss me cutting in line, so that this month will be my treat? Lu Tongguang, ever easygoing, nodded promptly. Sure. Since you just took up your post, you can indeed make use of the group dinner to familiarize yourself with your co-workers and forge relationships. Be careful when choosing the location, however. You don't need to make a reservation at those big restaurants or taverns, just some good quality, cheap little places will do. If you stick out too much, those behind you will complain about you. This was a conscientious proposal. Understanding the reasoning therein, Tang Fan quickly acknowledged the help. How many higher UPS should I invite, then? The other shook his head. None. They cherish their plumage, so they won't mingle with us. Inviting the chiefs and deputy chiefs alone will be fine. Don't the executives need to be invited, too? Deputy chiefs were chiefs' assistants, while executives were a rank down. They were true 6th rank and each office had one. Lu Tongguang shook his head again. No, only the chiefs and the deputy chiefs. There was a particularity, here. In the eyes of a higher official like Lu Tongguang, executives were classified as supporting roles. Though they had a rank, there was no need to be too close with them, else seniority would be obscured and the disdain of others would be drawn. Looking at this, the rules of the 6 ministries were stricter than those of the Shuntian prefecture. For dinners at the latter, Tang Fan had typically called patrol leaders like Lao Wang over for it, which had showed camaraderie throughout the ranks. It seemed like every place had its own standards. Mentally jotting down these details, Tang Fan chatted with Lu Tongguang some more, until he prepared to leave. Speaking of which, he hadn't even been to his own office at this point, nor seen his own subordinates. He needed to go and remember some faces, of course. However, Lu Tongguang called out to stop him. Brother Runking, there's something I need to tell you, first. Seeing that he was serious, Tang Fan felt a bad premonition. There's no harm in just speaking, Brother Lu. Your current assistant, Deputy Chief Yin Yuanhua, is Liang Wenhua's disciple. The one that was supposed to take over your position. Bearing the awful news that Lu Tongguang had divulged to him, Tang Fan finally arrived at his own office. There was no difference between this room and the workstations of other offices, aside from the slight one of the interior decor. There were a lot of flowers and plants here. His predecessor, Chief Zhou, had clearly been fond of gardening. What a shame it was that as soon their owner had left, his subordinates had had no idea what their new superior would prefer, so the plants had been moved out to the porch, where they were soon about to wilt. Once Tang Fan entered the workroom, he caught sight of someone in the middle of removing a pot of peonies from it. Upon seeing him, the other immediately placed the flower pot down and bowed. This humble official is the executive of Henan, Dai Hongming. Salutations to you, sir. Tang Fan exempted him from the bow. Were these flowers left behind by Chief Zhou? Dai Hongming affirmed. The former presiding official had died of illness. Ordinarily, and to avoid bad luck, everything should have been replaced with new ones before the new official came to take over. Dai Hongming had noticed that the bailiffs were slacking off. They had only switched out the brushes, ink, paper, and inkstone, not moving the flowers out, and that the hour was almost here. He had seen Tang Fan paying visits to his superiors and colleagues, which meant that he was going to come over soon. Thus, he had no choice but to set to task himself in preparing to move all the flowers out, in order to avoid bad luck for their new superior. They're nice to look at. You don't have to move them out. Just move them back in, Tang Fan unexpectedly said. No one's been watering these plants, so they'll need a bit without delay, lest they dry up and die soon. Dai Hongming nearly cried when he heard this, thinking, what in the hell did I waste all that effort moving them all around for, then? Yet, he didn't dare to argue. As was said, a new official taking up post would start 3 fires. Perhaps this Chief Tang felt that he was slacking off, so he was looking to inconvenience him. He could only agree hence, after which he put the peony pot back in its original spot, then went to go outside. Tang Fan called out to stop him, tone very amiable. Such trivial matters are for others to do, Executive Dai. Don't bother yourself with it. This official has something to chat with you about. The other was a bit antsy hearing this. What do you wish to ask, sir? There's no need to be nervous, Tang Fan said with a smile. I just have some casual questions. Apart from you, how many members are in the Henan office? Answering you, sir, there are 4 in total. 2 are secretaries and the other 2 are couriers. If you have any errands that needs to be worked on, you can instruct them to do it. Dai Hongming paused, then showed a small, too pleasing smile. Of course, if you have something urgent and it wouldn't be convenient for you to hand it over to them, you can hand it over to me, and I'll do it. Despite entering his 40s this year, Dai Hongming was still a true 6th-rank executive in the ministry. Ultimately, aside from his own lack of great abilities, he also had no backers. After working for Tang Fan's predecessor for 9 years, he had never stepped off of his original spot. He didn't have a renowned mentor, like Deputy Chief Yin Yuanhua. As a third-role palace honorate, he was only slightly better than a provincial honorate, so he could only rely on his superiors for support. Following the death of Tang Fan's predecessor, he had immediately become a motherless child. As he saw it, this new boss could have been regarded as a new patron he could rely on, if he hadn't unfortunately stolen Yin Yuanhua's position. The man horribly loathed him, and Assistant Minister Liang was backing him, making it difficult to say whether this new boss would be able to sit stably in his seat. This had twisted up in Dai Hongming's mind, and he had mentally struggled for a long time prior to Tang Fan's arrival. Then, once he had seen how young the other was, his heart had quickly gone cold, as he believed that he would certainly be no match for Yin Yuanhua. At best, he would end up being forcefully reduced to a wooden puppet on display. Tang Fan smiled, as if not comprehending his implication. Since it's my first day on the job, go on and call everyone over so that we can familiarize with each other. Dai Hongming was a little disappointed, but had to muster up his energy to answer, then left to call for the others. After 15 minutes, the clerks had pretty much arrived in unison, and they all bowed to Tang Fan at the same time, introducing themselves in succession. Tang Fan's eyes swept a full circle around. How come I don't see Deputy Yin? He suddenly asked. Dai Hongming inwardly grumbled as he forced a smile. He said that an old ailment of his flared up, that his legs were in pain, so he couldn't walk. He told me to report his offense to you, sir, and that he would have come but can't. As soon as that was said, everyone's expression changed. That was clearly him not taking Chief Tang seriously. They all peered at him, wanting to see how he would resolve this. Yet, all they saw was a slight look of shock on his face. His legs were in pain? Is he lame? He asked with concern. Why did that sound like he was cursing him? Everyone mumbled on the inside, though, upon seeing the chief Tang's genuine worry, they then felt that that wasn't it. Hesitating in his speech, Dai Hongming hemmed and hawed. Maybe he has some kind of chronic joint pain. What a joke. Yin Yuanhua was just 30 years old this year, how could he have any sort of joint pain or arthritis? But, could he have ever said, he's deliberately making things hard for you, so he's putting on a display of power? Tang Fan sighed. Deputy Yin has only just passed 30. He's so young, yet has gotten joint pain, how will he fare in the future? Ah, never mind. Since he's ill, he ought to recuperate properly. It's fine if he doesn't come. As expected, he's one soft persimmon, they all inwardly thought, believing that since he knew Yin Yuanhua's origins, he was too afraid to have a falling out with the other party. The next moment, they heard him continue. Very well. Executive Dai, have someone go out and buy a few things to send to Deputy Yin. Take it as a bit of kind regard from me. What should be sent? The other asked unenthusiastically. Against expectations, their new superior was not only not going to bother with Yin Yuanhua's impoliteness but was even planning to bow his head first. What level of dignity was this? Dai Hongming lamented in secret, mood completely dropping to the bottom of the valley. It seemed like he could already envision his own dismal road ahead. Tang Fan appeared to be entirely ignorant of all the different emotions of the crowd. Go to an apothecary and buy some Siler and sweet flag rhizomes. What kind of gift was that? Dai Hongming was startled, thinking that he had misheard. Huh? Did this official not speak clearly enough? Tang Fan asked, displeased. No, no, this humble official will get to it, the other quickly answered. He wasn't sure what effect the rhizomes had, but everyone knew that Siler treated joint pain. Dai Hongming was momentarily unclear on whether his superior had actually understood things or was faking stupidity. Erring on the side of caution, he asked again, how much of each of those medicines would be appropriate to get, sir? What do the rhizomes treat? Tang Fan laughed. Ah, sweet flag rhizomes are mainly for treating senility and forgetfulness, with the effect of sobering the psyche and stimulating the wits. They're perfect for Deputy Yin's illness. As for how much should be gotten, as I see it, his illness is quite serious. At least 4 or 5 coins worth of it would be enough. He was actually mocking Yin Yuanhua. This gentleman wasn't afraid of him, he was confronting him head-on. But once the medicine was delivered, wouldn't Yin Yuanhua go insane with rage? Everyone was unable to react for a second, staring at Tang Fan mutely. Sir, that wouldn't be fine, would it? Dai Hongming asked, face full of suffering. Tang Fan's smile was quickly put away. He looked at him coldly. What? Are you intending to disobey my order? The other jolted, subsequently saying that he wouldn't dare to do so. He wasn't going to buy that stuff, of course. After the meeting was adjourned, he took some money and commanded a clerk below him to go purchase the 2 medicinal materials. Said clerk had been scolded by Yin Yuanhua before and also had the mind to curry favor with the new chief, so he bought and brought back half a caddy in one go. Dai Hongming's face went black as soon as he saw that. He also knew that this was Tang Fan forcing him to take a side. If he failed to satisfy him, he would undoubtedly be alienated and removed by him someday. However, Dai Hongming had not been to Yin Yuanhua's liking to begin with, so even if he didn't do this, the man would still not find him pleasing to the eye. After pondering this, Dai Hongming grit his teeth, thought to himself that he might as well go all in and delivered the medicine over himself. Yin Yuanhua was proud of how he had dismissed Tang Fan when all of a sudden, the clerk that was forever currying favor with him ran over to report to him what Tang Fan had said, which made him furious when he heard it. Was Tang Fan cursing him? Before his rage hit its end, Dai Hongming then delivered medicine to him. This was a naked slap to the face. In less than a day's time, word spread throughout the Ministry of Justice that Deputy Chief Yin of Henan relied upon having an acting assistant minister as a mentor and intended to dismiss his newly appointed superior, yet hadn't expected to instead be viciously made a fool of. Yin Yuan, who had used the excuse of his legs being in pain to not pay respect to his new superior, and in turn, Tang Fan had sent sweet flag rhizomes to ridicule him as having a disease of the mind. Once anyone heard about this, their stomachs would convulse with laughter, after which they would inwardly worry for Tang Fan. Would a short moment of flaunting bear edible fruit? Word of this incident very soon reached the ears of the Assistant Minister of the Left, Liang Wenhua. End chapter.